And welcome to the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. Today's episode, we're talking to another musician, another promoter, actually, and so we're talking to the owner of Breaking and Entering and the co-host of the Hustling Sideways podcast. And what he does is he's got a website that covers the Milwaukee music scene, and they feature and showcase independent artists and book concerts that feature them. So I'm excited to be rocking out today with Allen Halas. Hey, Allen, are you ready to rock?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So we always start off here on a good note. Tell me a story of success that we can be inspired by.
Yeah, this summer has been this past summer has been a really good note to start on. We did a ton of shows that we booked, but we also did our first time at one of the first times at the Rave, which is like a 4,000 person venue in Milwaukee, which is we have never done that before, anything of that magnitude. So that was huge. We also got to have one of Jay-Z's producers come in for an event that we had this year. And he came in as a guest judge for this beat battle thing that we do. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But this whole summer has been like a really, really good run for us this past summer. So lots of, exciting things happening for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's some big names.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
must have been super cool to get that kind of person involved, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was a new experience because you're working on just a whole different level. But it was exciting for sure to be part of it.
Wow, right on. So now we always talk about the good note and the bad note because sometimes things don't go as planned. And I'm wondering, can you share with us something that didn't go as planned and how you recovered from that?
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Basically, to make a very long story short, we used to do monthly concert series in Milwaukee at like one venue every month, kind of thing. And pre-COVID, we were doing pretty well. We were booking pretty consistently at venues, getting good crowds and things like that. During COVID, our venue shut down that we were going to, so we started bouncing around to other places to try and find like, okay, where could we do a couple months here, a couple months there. So we landed on one venue that was like right in the center of Milwaukee, really accessible to get to, like a busy neighborhood. And we booked like, we coordinated for like 6 shows, 6 months back to back, and they tanked and they did not do
Oh,
well at all. But we were already committed to them. So like the next month, we would come in and then we'd eat it a little bit, and then we'd come in the next month after that, do everything that we could to promote it, and then eat it a little bit just because it wasn't a regular like music venue. But it's a place that we do events. They had an event space and a stage, so we were like, oh, we can make something happen here. Maybe not so much.
yeah, yeah. Wow.
So
Okay, so what happened then?
So to get back at that, I mean, like one thing that we've really focused on now is it also made me kind of rethink about how we are doing shows instead of doing multiple months in the same place. There's a lot of really great music venues in Milwaukee. So why not be at all of those places, right? Like what we do is we're a website that covers the entire city of Milwaukee, original artists that are making music. So that should be reflected in how we do our live events. So we changed up our whole process to say like, okay, we're going to do 1 month at this place, and then the next month we're going to be somewhere completely different, and then the next month will be somewhere completely different. I also made a checklist of all the things that I need to do to promote a show. What event calendars does this need to be on? What advertising do I need to pay for? Like, what do I need to do in order to make this as successful as possible and not feel like I dropped the ball somewhere along the line? So, and it's worked. And it really, I mean, we saw the impact, like I said, this past summer.
Wow. What made you decide to do this business in the first place?
So I've always been involved in music locally since I was probably in high school. I started off, I really got my start making beats for hip hop producers, or for hip hop artists in Milwaukee, I should say. So I got my start making music, and then from there, always wanted to be in a band and just never really had the opportunity to do it. I mean, me and my friend would jam in our basement, but that was about it. But hip hop was accessible because all it needed to be was me being able to make it on a computer and send those beats off. So stayed involved in music from then on. In college, I had a radio show with a friend on student radio that we were gonna, we always had Milwaukee music involved with that. And then the long story short is he was a psychology major, I was a communications major, so we split off, but I kept the website. And so used it and started using the website as a place to showcase, Milwaukee artists and talent. This was like 10 years ago, so this was like the blog era of how you discovered music. And then it just kind of evolved from there, and I was like, well, I could make a go of this and really try to have a viable media outlet in Milwaukee, to just focus on music, which was something that was kind of lacking in the city, honestly, other than the newspaper that had to cover Milwaukee artists, but they also had to cover when big touring acts were coming into town, so they were spread thin, and some of the other entertainment outlets weren't as prevalent at that point. So there was an opportunity, and I've made the most of it, and I've made it kind of my baby from here on out.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, because I find a lot of I mean there's a lot of focus on like the big Taylor Swifts and all the big people, but what about the local people, right? They
Yeah.
don't really get the same type of attention unless they're, on one of those big labels, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, my main job is I work for On Milwaukee, which is the largest digital outlet in the city. And so when things like that do come to town, I get to go cover it for that outlet. But then I've
Oh,
learned to like take the local things and put that on my site. And there's a very good communication between the two that we're like, okay, there's a way to do this and specialize with just the local original artists in Milwaukee on my site. And then the bigger stuff goes there.
wow. And so what has been the response, both from the artists and also from the fans? Like, has it been good? You know?
Yeah, actually. So the nice thing about this has been really when I started, the music scene in Milwaukee was drastically different. There's a lot of people doing really good things, but they were happening kind of in pockets all over the city.
Yep.
And once our site, I mean, a number of other things happened, not just our site, but a number of other things kind of happened that really started creating a community around music in Milwaukee. So what we've been able to do is help foster our local scene and make it somewhere that, if you want to discover a new artist, like we are the place to go now, which was not always the case, but people have been really receptive. We get tons of artists sending us music every day, sending emails in to us, sending in DMs to me, and like
Hmm.
all sorts of ways to really reach out and be like, hey, I want to be featured on this site, which is a cool problem to have, right? That there's more supply than we can actually give out there for music. But yeah, there's no shortage of amazing people doing great things here, and I think it's really a byproduct of everybody being able to like discover one another on my site.
Hmm. So then how do you decide who gets on the site and who doesn't?
We're really, really open with things. We really try to. Basically, it just comes down to time. If I can get as much music out there as possible, if they're artists that have a little bit more cachet in Milwaukee and or they have their name out there a little bit more, like that does tend to get a little bit of a priority because you ultimately at the end of the day you want to get traffic back to your website, you want to get clicks
Yeah.
back. But we're also really good about trying to break new artists and get people's first project out into the world, right? Like that if we can be a signal boost for that, like that's great. So it really just kind of comes down to, whatever I can get to in the amount of time that I can get to it for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense too, right? Now, I mean, maybe this is an awkward topic, but what if you don't like the music that is coming in, or you don't think it's very good?
Sure. So I mean, we have plenty of music that comes in that is not my cup of tea, or it's just something that maybe I don't get it, or maybe I just don't like it. Maybe it's not that great.
Yeah.
Um, I try to, most of the time, honestly, if it's not good, I don't write anything negative about it. I just don't cover it.
Yeah.
Or if I don't think that people are going to really resonate with it, like I will admit there's a lot of like weird experimental music that gets made
Totally.
that is like, because we have stuff like Bandcamp will send us, new releases and things like that. And so I try to check those out. But if it's a Bandcamp release that's like 10 minutes of field recordings and it's listed as music, and it's
Yeah.
a little bit harder to justify, like, how do I get that across to maybe a pop or a hip hop or a rock audience? So those things kind of weed themselves out, but not saying that there isn't room for something like that. But rather than being negative, I definitely just am like, we'll just not cover this one and then keep eyes on that person, going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I imagine that because I mean, music is so subjective, right? I mean, sometimes it might not be my cup of tea, like you say,
Mhm.
but if they start to, gather an audience and all that stuff, well, then you sort of like, oh, okay, all right. So there are some people that want to see this. That probably gets bumped up, right? I imagine at that point.
Oh yeah, and that has happened already before where it's been something that where I've been like, I don't get it, I don't see it.
Yeah.
But then they've developed a presence outside of my site, and I've been like, well, I do need to cover it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's important for, it's now a gaping hole if I don't have that in our sphere of coverage, right? So you start covering those things and then try to get the story from that. And it brought a whole different audience into our site too, which is
Yeah.
great. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, it's funny because we back, 50 years ago or whatever it was, you really had to impress some sort of executive suit guy in order to get your music out there. And there
mhm.
are these gatekeepers, and they decide what's good music and what's not good music. And now you're actually that suit, right? In a
Yeah,
way, where like you're kind of going like, I don't get it, right?
right.
But
Yeah.
I think the difference though now is that back then you actually had to get that suit to look at your music in order for anything to happen. Now, like you say, you can put it on Bandcamp. You can actually start to, get that suit to notice you, right?
Yeah, totally. And I know that there are people that are, I'm connected to like the radio people and some of the promoters and things like that in Milwaukee that are like the bigger like festival promoters and things like that. Like there have been people that are higher up in the chain than me that have already said, "Hey, we found somebody on your site," which is great.
Oh.
That kind of is like a little pat on the back for me to be like, "Hey, your website is doing something for someone," because they've definitely paid attention to and had eyes on that. I just actually went and got some drinks with somebody that works in radio, and she was saying to me that you're a good self promoter, and I was like, I'm really not trying to promote myself. I'm trying to promote, this wave of talent that is happening here in Milwaukee. And I was like, I just didn't know if you even knew about our site initially. And she was like, oh, I've been getting your emails for years. I was like, oh, okay, perfect. Like that's great to know, like that what you're doing has an impact.
That's isn't that cool how that works out too? Like when you're not really trying to promote yourself, you're promoting yourself even better, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting
totally.
how that works. Okay, so I've got so many like different analogies with music and business, and practice is one of them that comes up quite often. And I mean, in music, it's obvious. I mean, you can't, you got to go to the gig practice stuff, right? But what does that mean
Yeah.
in your business? Like, what does practice mean to you?
Sure. So that actually kind of details into my story. Like breaking and entering has ultimately been practice for my real jobs. Long story. Like I worked in a bank for 7 years. I was in their marketing department while I was building this website, and so during COVID, I made the switch to working on media full time. I got a job with a magazine here in Milwaukee and was their music writer. And ultimately jumped into my current job, from that magazine into my current job at On Milwaukee. But that was all because my background, even though it was in communications and digital media, my background in writing and publishing and all that, I learned a lot of that running my own site and running my
Mm,
own business. And I think it gave me a completely different understanding of it than like somebody that would come in from radio or TV into the digital media world because I had to wear all of the hats for a little
mm,
bit and
yeah,
say like, okay, I write for the site and I have to create the content for the site, but then I also have to figure out how to make it, money off the site. What do I need to do? Like, what is the importance of like pushing to social media and what's the, importance of learning all these different platforms and how things work best on each of the individual platforms. So it really has kind of like sharpened the knife for me, I guess, kind of thing, or steel sharpens
yeah.
steel, or whatever analogy you want to use. Like, there was no way to do it other than to just go ahead and do it. So that's what running, breaking, and entering has been just practice. And there's also like things within my own business that has like, taught me how to do things by trial by fire kind of thing. I didn't know how to book shows initially. I didn't know how to make money from shows initially. So, just learning it over years and years and years of doing it and being repetitive and figuring out what I want to do next. has really just kind of just honed all of my abilities.
Wow. And learning from the mistakes, right?
Oh yeah, lots of mistakes. So many mistakes along the way. I don't think anyone has ever had a show that hasn't where something hasn't gone wrong. Like it's very rare for us that we have one or a show where everything goes right.
Mhm.
So when that happens though, it feels great and you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I mean, like music, especially these shows. I mean, there's so much risk that goes into it. You're having to rent places probably. You're doing so much, and if nobody shows up, well, that's all on you, right? But
Right.
and so I imagine you've gotten through some of those mistakes. But so now, how do you get the fans to show up to these shows? What's your strategy on that?
Sure. Social media is huge for us. So for starters, I think it does start with building a good rapport with the venue. We don't necessarily rent a place in the sense that we do it, other than we pay for production, which is like your sound guy for the night. A
Okay.
lot of venues have their own sound guy. But as far as getting people to come to the shows, having a website is great because we can run our own ads for free on the website, and people are already coming to that. But we also we've built an email list, we've built an extensive social media following. We get on that's where having a checklist of all the things that we need to be. Like we go to the different community website calendars where people are going to find out how to what they want to do this weekend, and we post our events there. It has literally gotten to the point though now with social media where you have to hit somebody on a one-to-one basis, right? Like even an email that gets quickly disregarded. So like if it's a show that we have coming up, this last show that we did a couple weeks ago, I was literally DMing as many people that I could from our Instagram account and just being like, "Hey, this is this Friday. Please come out. Here's the ticket link. You save
Wow.
$5 if you buy these tickets ahead in advance instead of getting them at the door." Like sending them that link and getting that out as far as possible. Just because you have to literally for the big hip hop week show that we did, we had to text people. Like you have to literally get your message out as direct as possible to somebody now, which wasn't always the case. Like we still do paid advertising and things like that, but however I can get my message out, I'm gonna get my message out, and I have to get it to you, the concert goer. So I will do
Wow.
that at any cost, I guess.
Yeah, Alan, you know what? I've noticed the same thing when I'm booking my shows. You really do have to like message people, and the good news though is that 20 years ago, whatever it is, you probably had to pick up the phone and call somebody or go
Yeah,
see them, right? So now, going into your DMs and, drafting out a probably fairly scripted message to
yep,
a bunch of different people is so much less time, right? So you can
yeah,
do that, but it is
yeah.
that work, right?
Yeah, and being able to, copy and paste and say, here's the ticket link, and not, hey, I got to call you and hope you show up on Friday and pay your ticket at the door. Like that helps too. It does help when you know that you've sold a few tickets ahead of time to
Yeah.
be like, okay, there's a little bit less anxiety about the show, knowing that some money has come in from it at least.
Right.
So.
Okay, so then what's your strategy on ticket? Like do you pay more at the door, less at the door, more like how does this whole thing work for you?
Generally, I try to do that is at least $5 cheaper in advance for a ticket. So that, and usually the venues are very cool with that. The point being, it helps me to be like, okay, if we're $250 that we have to spend on production, if 25 people buy tickets, we've broken even by the time I get in the door to start the show that night to set up, which is great.
Yep.
So that is my goal then is, just get to that break even point before the day of the show. And if that means I got to DM a bunch of people, email as many people as possible, I'll do that, so that we can get to that goal of like break even. Anybody that comes in the door, that's profit or goes to the bands, obviously.
Love it. That's awesome. Now, do you use like, whatever Ticketmaster or Eventbrite? Like how do you get those tickets out?
Generally, Eventbrite for us, if it's us putting the event together, a lot of the venues have ticketing partners, which is great. Even the local, like independent venues have a certain ticketing service that they use. So that helps us too, because once we have the ticket link from them, we'll send that out to them. But we always if it's an event that we're doing, it'll be Eventbrite, and then we just use an app to kind of track, sales and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you pay the fees and all that stuff, or you get the customer to pay the fees?
No, I eat the fees on that, generally if it's me throwing it. The venues all have their own policies as far as like, if it's a $10 ticket, it might cost you $13 in advance or something like
Yeah.
that. But if we can say $10 in advance and $15 the day of the show, like great. Um, and honestly, we also try to keep our prices fairly low. When I started, we were doing $5 covers to get into a bar, and it was like
Wow.
a 100-person capacity bar, and I was like $5, and then we'll split. Like we didn't care if we made money at that point. We were just like, this is a promotional thing for the website, so it was like the bands will split the money from the door, the venue will get all the money from the bar, and we get to put our logo and advertising all over the place for the night and take over a bar. And hopefully that translates to more people coming to the website, which then leads them to learn about the next show, which leads them to learn about whatever in Milwaukee. So we looked at it as purely promotional to start, and now we make a little bit of money on it when we can, but not a
Hey.
lot.
Do you think that people see your events as like, okay, I'm gonna follow this event maker because it's always going to be a good event? Or do you think that they're very individual to the bands themselves?
We try to make it that they like breaking and entering and like our shows. I think initially that was how it worked. Now they're a little more loyal to whoever we pull out to bring out for the
Right.
show. But one thing that I pride myself on is being able to have the best production possible. So we do a beat battle, which is like think of like 8 Mile, but instead of people rapping
Yeah.
at each other, they're making beats and they play a minute beats back and forth at each other. We also have hip hop artists that perform at that show, and we do it at a place that is an event space, but it's normally a restaurant until 8 p.m. and then after that it becomes an event space. So I
Mm.
have to make that the best looking stage as possible. So I'm sitting literally next to a trunk of lights that I bought and like mixers and sound like wireless mics that I bought because I want to make sure that I have the best produced show as possible that I can bring to that event space. So that is, I think, the difference is that, we want people to see, hey, every time I go to a breaking and entering show, like I actually really like this show because I like the experience of being there. I like, knowing that it's going to look good, it's going to sound good. So we try to pride ourselves on that. It's going to run on time, which is huge, you know.
Oh yeah,
So we
yeah.
try to make it the best experience that we can make it.
Well, so but that sounds expensive and it sounds like a lot of money up front. Like, how do you decide what's a worthwhile expense, knowing that you might actually lose money?
Yeah, so it's a gradual buy for me. It was for sure like I'm still using the same mixing board that I've had when I was in like grade school that my parents got me. That is our live soundboard. I have made that thing work, and it has an iPod adjustment like attachment to it still. And I've figured out how to make that thing, work and be functional for what we need. Um, but then eventually I got to a point where I was like, it would be cool if we had lights. So one year we made enough money that I was like, okay, let's reinvest that into like buying a cheap lighting system off of Amazon. And
Uh-huh.
that's what we did, and they're not great lights, but they work and they look good. And it looks a hell of a lot better than when they performed to like an empty dark room,
Yep.
with just the venue lights on it. So I was like, so over time, like things like that happened. I mean, even like the home production stuff that I have for our digital content and for podcasts like this mic that I'm using was because we sent somebody to South by Southwest in 2020 and that got canceled. And so he sent us the money back. And so I was like, let's buy some podcast mics. We started a podcast from there. So, like everything is just a gradual build of like, what do we need next? What's the next thing that we can upgrade? I'm using a camera right now that I bought in college. Like just figuring out how to make the most out of these things.
That's awesome. And that's really good advice for just about anybody with any business is that sometimes you don't necessarily need the top of the line of all this equipment. Just buy what gets the job done and then you can work to upgrade it later on, right?
Yeah, and like honestly, I repurpose some of the stuff, that will do the job. So like this camera that I'm using to talk to you, is one that I bought in college because I was freelancing weddings and freelancing event videos and stuff like that. eventually I knew I needed like a good DSLR camera to shoot photos and video, so I bought that at one point when I could afford to do that. But then now this camera doesn't go away forever. It gets relegated to like a streaming and like a webcam kind of thing. And that makes that process, look nicer because of that. So it's just a matter of doing the most with what you can afford to do. And, sometimes you got to get a little creative, but it doesn't look the best, like from the outside. But if the end product looks great, and that's all I
Yeah.
need.
Agreed. All right, so it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
So what's exciting right now is that I think the Milwaukee music scene is very, very good, but I'm starting to branch out into some things that independent artists can use. One thing that I have noticed over time from years and years of working in independent music and receiving submissions is that some artists just don't know how to reach out to the media the right way. So I've launched a course on how to pitch your music to the media the right way and how to get your information out in a way that me as a writer is going to want to cover it. I've made it as cheap as possible that I could make it. It's through an app called Qua, where basically what you get it and it looks like an Instagram story, like you tap through the different lessons. And it's a resource that I just started in 2025 just to try and make it something that will be a tool that musicians and artists and creatives can use. And I'm excited to see where that goes because that's a whole different dimension of what I've been able to do, and it's different, thing for artists to have a resource out there.
That's that's really smart. And I mean, the cool part about that is that now you're teaching people how to make your job easier as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does work that way, but I mean, also it works if you're trying to pitch to a, Rolling Stone or a Pitchfork or whoever. Like, you do need those fundamental things, and it eliminates that kind of gap of, like we said before, of like gatekeeping, where somebody might not know they might make amazing music, but they don't know how to get their music out to the right people, so they're spamming them on Facebook and it's getting disregarded, or spamming them on
Yeah.
Instagram and that gets tossed aside. So this is a way to like go about it the professional way.
I love that. So how do I find out more?
For that one, you can go to allenhalas.com and then slash pitching, and you can get the course from there. But everything else that I do is through breakingandentering.net.
That's awesome. Right on. Okay. So hardest question. Who's your favorite rock
Sure.
star?
Oh man, favorite rock star is a really tough one. It's a maybe a controversial one because I grew up listening to a lot of punk rock and skateboarding, and the first band that really felt like it was my band kind of thing was NoFX, California punk band legends. They just broke up last year. Um, I guess Fat Mike would be my favorite rock star, but he's a very controversial like figure in the sense that he says a lot of things that don't go over well, or maybe says
Mm.
some things that are insensitive. But what I do appreciate more than anything is that he started his own label, Fat Records, and NoFX is a band that never really compromised in that sense. They never went to the major label. They figured out how to do it independently. And that sort of spirit is the thing that I think I like the best. So while Fat Mike's a controversial person to like, I think he's probably my favorite rock star just because of the drive to be like, you know what, we can do our own thing and make less money, but we'll do it our way, which is very punk, and it's very my ethos as well. You can do your own thing.
Absolutely. It's very work at home rock star too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do it your own way, just get it done, right? I mean, and
Right,
and don't
exactly.
compromise your own. I mean, even though sometimes they are controversial, your own self, right? You're just being
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And that just is the spirit of, keeping it true to yourself and your own thing, and yeah, being able to have your own personality and put that into your work, and not working for other people, if you don't have to, is great.
I love that. So is there anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I just really want to say thank you for having me on, honestly. I do a lot of stuff, obviously, that are, a DIY from home kind of thing. Breakingandentering.net is the website. We also have the Hustling Sideways podcast that talks about having a job and having a side hustle at the same time. Like I said, I used to work at a bank, so I used to go interview rock stars in my car and then come back into, I'd interview a musician in my car and then come back from my 15-minute break and fill out reports and, do whatever else I needed to do. So being able to do those things is very much in the spirit of what you do. So thank you for having this platform and being able to, have people like me on.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, then. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Awesome. And to the listeners, make sure you go to workathomerockstar.com for more information, and we'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.